Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy McCarraher, author, speaker, and entrepreneur. And each week I talk to men and women who've lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit follow and subscribe. Today I'm talking to Penny Power OBE, one of the UK's most experienced voices on human connection in business. She is a speaker, entrepreneur, and author, and as we discuss, she has spent over 40 years building the conditions for people to feel they matter in their work, their relationships, and their communities. You'll hear how in 1998, Penny and her husband Thomas co-founded Ecademy, the world's first online business network, predating LinkedIn and Facebook and growing to 650,000 members across 52 countries. But it hasn't all been plain sailing. And what looks like immense success from the outside can mask extraordinary difficulty behind the scenes. Hello, Penny. Thank you so much for joining me on the Phoenix Conversations.
Lucy, I'm so excited. This is such a brilliant podcast. It's wonderful to have a chance to be on it with you.
Penny, I always start with the beginning, childhood. What were you like as a little girl? Where did you grow up? What was life like for you when you were small?
I grew up in a family in Berkshire where I was the youngest of four siblings. My brother was 12 when I was born. My sister was 10. Then there was a big gap. And then there was my sister and I. The whole family had moved south from Scotland just before I was born. And so it was a very weird feeling because I actually believed I was adopted because all my Scottish relatives and all my family used to joke about the fact that I was the English Nuch. And it's always been very confusing to me. But we lived very rurally in a little tiny village. My mother wasn't a particularly social lady. My siblings pretty much left home by the time I needed them to be really around. And my father worked a lot. And my mum, I think things happened in their marriage that made her quite an unhappy person. But my mum used to say, you fill a room. And when I look back, I think probably I was quite a lively, quite positive girl. Education was in a convent, and I think I was one of those difficult kids because I think they liked me, but they found me with my laughter and personality. I think they all found me very hard to handle. But it wasn't that they did, I was never nasty. I always did my homework. There wasn't anything they could really pin it on, but I think I was just quite lively. I think people now would label themselves ADHD, but I don't know whether I can take it that extreme. But the education system I was found very hard, not just because difficult to learn from nuns that don't know what a curriculum is. But yeah, it didn't really suit my type of intelligence.
I love that your mum said you could fill a room because literally that is exactly what you do now and have been doing for years. It's very prescient, I think.
Well, I've learnt to fill a room now with people rather than myself.
Yes, exactly.
It's very important to me.
When did you get out of the education system and your family life, really? What was your growing up reinvention?
Well, a really beautiful thing happened when I was about 11 and neighbours moved in who had a very cerebral palsic child, Toby, who was probably only about 4 or 5 years younger than me, but it was significant at that age. And I loved going around there. I loved the mother, Carol, and I loved her little boy, Toby. And it became somewhere I went whenever I got a chance, and in the end, in school holidays, I started volunteering at the physiotherapy department for disabled children in Basingstoke Hospital. And I decided I wanted to be a physiotherapist, and I absolutely was so excited. I got huge numbers of endorsements. I had to spend 3 years in sixth form when we moved from the convent to retake all my O-levels and then do A-levels. And unfortunately, and I had to do physics in a year. Can you believe that? That is not my brain. And I got that, but I had only had time really to do 2 A-levels and mental capacity and plus those. And the physiotherapy qualifications changed when I applied and I wasn't able to apply. So I had a forced gap year and I thought I'll go and do psychology at university and do child psychology instead. And then when I was working in a pub, a headhunter girl, a lady called Barbara, who actually helped map my whole career really for about 10 years, she suggested going in and doing telesales in a a computer company. It was a distributor selling computers and printers and accessories to the 5,000 computer dealers that were around the world in 1983. And I joined that company, and I did resign in the October to go to university. But my boss, which I think became a really significant part of my career, I think, saw in me something that was quite different in the way that I was with people. They wanted to turn me into a supervisor. And in the end, I didn't go, and I had a remarkable 10 years of leadership in the tech industry.
Oh, so that was kind of like several reinventions in one, sort of wanting to do physiotherapy, ending up doing psychology for a bit, and then going into corporate.
Yes.
So you must have really reinvented yourself as somebody in corporate, because you're very individualistic, if I might say so. And so I wonder how that worked for you.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. I mean, I really deeply believe in togetherness. And I think maybe my unique style back in 1983 was I just saw business like a family. I think always yearned for that. We did have a good family. My mum had good family morals and values, and a lot of it, I think, looking back, was a duty-based thing, but it was very strong. And I didn't think of going into a business environment at 19 being any different. I just saw them as family, and I hugged them and cared for them. And I think I now when I look back, and I think when I got my first field sales role at 21 and I hugged and said goodbye to the clients, I think they were quite shocked, but it was just who I was. And humans love, love closeness. And I think I was known to sort of change cultures in organizations, because I really deeply believe that you show up who you want to be. You don't just become a victim of the cultures you're in. And if it doesn't work, then keep being who you are. I really deeply believe that. So I think that I'm still that little girl that used to go and see Toby, where he gave me so much self-esteem and validation with his smiles. And I slowly built my self-worth from feeling needed by him, feeling that I could contribute to him. And I applied that in my business career. So um, I don't feel that I became a different person. I think I just adapted to different environments, but kept into being a businesswoman rather than being somebody who was doing more in the caring industry. But I just saw myself as still the same person, really.
So you were selling through love. I mean, that sounds lovely.
It is. I mean, Robert Greenleaf, that wrote Servant Leadership in the 70s, there are sort of 10 principles of it. And I was called a servant leader when I was 22 by someone. And I think, it's pretty basic what that means. It means, being driven to serve others. And so when I went into quite senior, by 24, I was sales and marketing director and had 80 telesales staff. I had 6 regional offices. I had field sales. I had product managers, marketing. I had a lot of responsibility. My only job, I felt, was to help everybody be successful. And I just did that. And it sounds a little bit cute, but I just did that. That's actually where I got my strength from, because I've never been academically proud of myself. And so using emotional intelligence seemed the only natural way for me to thrive and survive in the world at that time.
That's a lovely way to be. So what ended it then, your incredibly successful career in corporate, your decade, your 20s, I guess, in
Yeah.
corporate?
So I met Thomas when he was 25, and we married when we were 26, and we had Hannah when we were 28. And I always knew that I wanted to be a full-time mum. I think many women our age could just relate to the fact that being a working woman wasn't the same as you can achieve now those years ago. And I was very determined to be at home with her, I think due to some of the desires of the type of mother I wanted to be. And so it was weird when I literally just found out I was pregnant and wasn't going to tell my boss. He called me in completely randomly to tell me that there was an opportunity for us to do a management buyout. And I ended up becoming very central to that, because I was the longest standing director in the company, and we were buying it from a holding company. And I insisted that I did stay, and it was very emotional because I wasn't planning to. But I managed to pull into the contract that if I was emotionally damaged by leaving my daughter, that they would let me out of the contract. But then by then the company would have the money and an investment. And so after Hannah was born, I did have to do some work for a few months, but she used to I remember taking her into a board meeting with 3i, and she was a very, very noisy feeder. It became really evidential that I was finding it too difficult. Of course, we weren't wealthy. Thomas was doing well for a young man, but we had double, big income. So when I left, I did try and see how I could do a little bit of interim thing here, dabble. I've got a godfather who had a manufacturing plant for baby equipment, and I did a bit of selling that into my baby friends and did a bit of interim sales director role, but nothing permanent until I was 33. And by then we had 3 children. And I came up with the idea that probably was the biggest pivot in my career in terms of being recognized for something.
Tell me about that then.
So we've always lived in Farnham for 36 years. And Thomas he's the entrepreneur. When I met him, I'd never met an entrepreneur before. Not knowingly. My family weren't. Nobody I knew was. I didn't even really understand the phrase. I think it did grow a lot, really, through the 90s, that phrase. But even a business owner, I don't think when I went to dealers, I really related to the fact that they were business owners necessarily. I think that's something that should have been taught more, that empathy around you're dealing with a business owner. So in 1998, he had created a very good reputation teaching and educating and speaking on e-commerce and e-procurement. And I was at home with the 3 children predominantly. I'd actually, as a side hustle, built an agency of 680 technology friends that were selling computers into the home. I was looking after 680 people who would go into schools and into homes and teach how to use computing in the home. And I had seen how hard it was to communicate and have a community of 680 people and only do it through email. But at the same time, Thomas was talking a lot about internet. And I just said to him one day, it was 7th of February 98, sitting in a Pizza Express with our kids on a Saturday afternoon. And I said to him, this internet thing isn't going to really excite me because everybody will always find a way to sell and buy. It's nothing extraordinary. But wouldn't it be amazing if it was a way to connect business people with one another as friends? And I said, I see how good a networker you are, but I also see the feast and famine of you get a client, you do that, then you need to find another one. And if you could network like you could online across the world. So I created the concept of Ecademy. I sort of just thought of it as something to play at, really. And there was a man who I'd done some interim work for as a sales director who we went out for lunch. And I told him my idea, and he said, I want to put 250,000 into that. And I said, that's really lovely, but I can't be the CEO of this business because I will damage my relationship with my children and I would never keep you happy. I would never be able to be that classic CEO. And he said, well, I will be. And so he joined, and very quickly he wanted to float it on the stock market. That required Thomas to join, and it very much pivotal around him as an entrepreneur anyway. And so by 2000, we were a fully up and running community for business owners that was growing fast, because it was the first one in the world. And we even had Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, as one of our members. And ultimately, over 14 years, we had 650,000 members subscribing and 5,000 events a year around the world.
It's so incredibly impressive. So tell me exactly what Ecademy was. And there were different parts to it, weren't there? There was a publishing company, I know. How did the cogs fit together?
That's so interesting that you mentioned that. Ultimately, back to that servant leadership piece, that's really important. We knew the lane we were in. We were building a community for business owners, for them to grow their businesses. But it did become a really significant brand in the market and a place of trust. And we strongly looked after the culture. And in fact, it wasn't me really that built it to where it is. It's Thomas, another CEO that joined, Glenn Watkins, who ran the business. I was ambassadorial. I hosted a lot of events. I managed the culture. So it really was teamwork. It really was. Andy Coote said, I'd really like to create a brand out of this for publishing. And we let him. I don't even know whether Glenn charged him licensing. And then Mindy Gibbons-Klein joined in and she took that over. And it was to help members license. And I think very much, it's just what I still believe to this day, is when you are the steward of a community, it's not about you. It's about everyone else. It's about everybody else's success and happiness. And so there were loads of businesses born out of Ecademy, like there are in our present community that we run, But we weren't taking a piece of them. We were just really thrilled that they were community members and they were thriving within it. And I think it's just like a village. You move into a village, you have the most fabulous neighbours. There's a culture in that village, probably created by the pub and the cricket ground or whatever the village has. And there's a village hall that runs events. And yes, somebody has to be the steward of the village hall and things like that. But nobody feels like they're being controlled inside that village around what they can create and events they can run and friends they can have. And that's how I see the community. It's Thomas and I are, although we're in the foreground in terms of leading the culture and encouraging things, it's very much about the people that we were serving.
So you were all came into this one company, and everybody was doing what they were best at, which sounds like a brilliant arrangement. But you had invented it. It was your concept.
Yeah, and we ultimately had the responsibility of keeping it on the road and making sure. I mean, servers at that time cost a fortune. It was a very, very challenging business to run. And, you know, the term trolls hadn't been invented, but we had to manage the culture, which meant the people that were nasty, racist, rude, all that, we had to throw them out. And they all became very frightening trolls in our lives that really wanted to destroy Thomas and I and destroy the business. So, you know, it was not an easy business to run. And financially, there were many, many years that we couldn't take any income from it. But we were on these platforms across the world and people seeing us as being very successful. And then when Reid Hoffman with LinkedIn and Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook came in, we were almost put on the same sort of stratosphere as them. But we were tiny and we were organically funded because the IPO didn't happen. The day before we were due to go out, the market crashed. And, you know, we were a small business, but with a big punch in it. You know, it was a very, very difficult business to run and very, very hard, but very beautiful in many ways. But also the other thing that we learned, which is really interesting, and I think this is a message that Thomas and I try to encourage other people to understand, is that Ecademy was made up of probably about 5,000 groups of about 100 people or more in some of them. So overnight in 2002, we created this ability for you to create your own group. We called them clubs. And we know that, you know, how people can run a group on Facebook and LinkedIn and everything. But obviously we were the first to do that. And we went to bed thinking, I wonder who's going to use that code and create their own group. Overnight, 270 groups had formed. And we thought there'd be maybe a publishing group, an accountant group, or this group or that group. But it was actually geographical. So overnight, a Dubai, a Sydney, a Melbourne, a Luton, a New York, they were just sprang up. And Thomas said it. I said at one point, it's really worrying, but how do we know these group leaders who weren't being paid anything, how are we going to know that they're going to have the right culture? And he said, it's the law of stepping forward. You know, it was what he said. They've stepped forward. They want to do this. So then it was about managing and appreciating those people around the world who weren't being paid a penny for what they were doing, but they were leading those groups, like some people lead a scout movement, or they believed in it and wanted to lead something in their towns. So, you know, that again, the distribution of support, making this community successful, was incredible.
Did you have any rogue ones that you had to get rid of, or did you have problems with any of them, or were they all sort of had the same values and behaved well and everything? There must have been the odd problem.
There was, but there was only 4 of us in the company. There was me and Thomas, Glenn and his wife, and a supplier who did our bookkeeping and support and things like that. You know, it looked like a huge company. It's interesting in this new AI world how people can, you know, now can see they can run businesses with fewer people if you run them efficiently and with the right culture and for the right shared mission and all of these things. So, but then there was the micro detail. There was no way that I could know whether somebody that running a club in the depths of Australia was nice or good. But usually people would contact Thomas or I if somebody wasn't comfortable. And the culture was from within the community, and we could see everything happening online and how people behaved, which became, back to psychology, it became an amazing way for me to understand human behavior and see the people who came in with a beautiful soul, wanting to make friends. And our strapline was friendship first, commerce second. And then you could see people who would come in purely looking for business and how they would burn their way through. Nobody would talk to them. Nobody would comment on their blogs. Nobody was interested in them because there was no give. And, to become significant really in the world or with any relationship, there's got to be a give and receive. There has to be in some way. And those people that were only into receiving and taking just weren't successful, didn't stay around.
How interesting. And Penny, Ecademy did come to an end. What happened?
So having not floated on the stock market, we originally did raise 750,000, which was before the IPO, which our CEO at that time used to make us look bigger than we were, employ a lot of people, get offices in a Regis Centre in Marble Arch. There was a lot of money spent. Because if we were going to get the IPO, we really had to go for it. And the IPO didn't happen. And so it was really difficult, and so Thomas and I earned money through speaking, Thomas did consulting, and all the money went into Ecademy. And then we created this subscription service, and a percentage of them subscribed. There was a very limited amount you could do if you weren't a subscriber. One of the reasons for that is by having a credit card, we could actually legitimately know whether someone was who they are. So we couldn't get people coming in, fake IDs and being nasty. And so ultimately, so there were lots of things that happened along the way, trying to finance it. We never wanted it to go from our lives. Well, it is in a way still part of our lives, but there were lots of things which I write a chapter called Being Broken in my book, Business is Personal, which gives the full story if somebody's interested. And it's not me as a victim, it's just circumstance. Barclays were going to buy us and pay us 8 million for it. So we were a 60 million pound valuation at the IPO. Then we were being offered 8 million. And we thought, well, that's great, bird in the hand. And it fell through. The day that we went to sign the paperwork was the day that Bob Diamond was the front page of the newspapers and the banking crisis. And the lawyers walked into the third floor of Canary Wharf and said, can't buy you. This is not the right time. So that sale had taken a lot of our time and attention. And so then we had to keep going. And really, we gave up our home in 2007. And then our CEO, the original one, left and said, I can't do this anymore. And we bought back his shares. And Thomas and I started to get into a lot of personal debt to keep it going, because we really believed in keeping it going. And also we'd created a home for so many business owners. Very hard to close the door on them. It's like the best pub in town and suddenly you can't open the door. It would be really hard for people. It was their home. It was where they made so many friends. It's where they built their brand. It's where their SEO was very central to them through their blogs. It was, we had to keep it going. And then we took out a loan with Clydesdale Bank. And because we didn't own our home at that time, we couldn't secure that loan against a home. So there were other securities that were hard for us, including not taking an income. So again, our income, 3 kids at school, and it was a very difficult period. Our own personal debts were growing. We were working very hard to try and bring in money in all sorts of ways, including obviously the subscription. By then, a lot of people didn't want to pay. They were saying, you're greedy. Why can I get it for free on Facebook? Why can we get it for free on LinkedIn? You can't talk to every individual, and you don't want to sound like victims, but we didn't have 330 million pounds worth of funding like LinkedIn at the beginnings. It was very difficult. Business models were changing. And social media was coming in. And so social media is where conversation turned to broadcasts, and people started thinking, I can create a brand, and that's going to mean fish are going to jump into my net. I don't have to make the effort of having conversations with people. So we're fighting cultural challenges as well as financial ones. So we had Clydesdale, and then we were 3 years into paying that debt and doing well, paying it off, and paying them rather than ourselves and things. And then they were selling to an Australian bank, and they contacted us and hundreds of thousands of small businesses and pulled the debt on a small clause, which is, if you change your business model during this period, we've got the right to call it back. And we were trying to change the business model in some way because we had to go free and things like that. And we couldn't pay that back. And so we had 29 days to find somebody to buy it, to try and save it. And that's what happened. And we came out with nothing, but we're left with huge debt.
Yeah, that must have been very hard. So how did you reinvent yourself from that period of massive success, incredible hard work, bringing up children, to sort of going back to nothing?
Very much back to nothing, minus nothing. In fact, it was really funny. Our son once said to Thomas, are we millionaires? And Thomas said, we're minus millionaires. And he was so young, he went, we're minus millionaires. It's so cute. It's so cute. So I think it was hardest on Thomas because I had been working in government and been joining some think tanks around supporting small business. Never listened to me, but I had a bit of a reputation in there. And I created a manifesto called the Digital Business Britain Manifesto. And I had created a little digital school to train people how to be digital coaches. Within Ecademy, the income went into Ecademy, but it was again a brand that I was building. And I wrote the Digital Business Britain Manifesto. And out of that, I came up with an idea of creating the Digital Marketing Apprenticeship. And I really believed in it because at the time, the Born Digital youths around 2011 they were actually rioting in Tottenham. They didn't know what to do. And I was saying to the market, got these incredible kids. We just need to give them business skills around their digital skills. And so I started another business. And that was going alongside Ecademy, but Thomas's identity was so tightly attached to Ecademy and mine as the founder as well, but his whole breathing life. And it was what he loved. He's the most incredible networker. He didn't have desire to do anything different. He had some Ned roles, but we both did lose our identity. I remember I used to be introduced on global stages, one of the most connected women in the world. And then I went to a Chamber of Commerce event in Farnham where we live. Probably about 40,000 people here now, was called the most connected person in Farnham. And it was a very big change. And there was a very big identity crisis. And we had 8 years really in the wilderness, we call it, until 2020, when I'd written my book, Business is Personal, in 2018. And I didn't know when I said it to Thomas, when this is published, maybe I'm going to have to become a vicar or a midwife. And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Well, being a vicar would be nice. You've got your flock, you've got your community. Midwifery, I love babies." Because I wasn't sure how it would land. But it was a very honest book about the journey of discovering yourself through becoming an entrepreneur, because it's a very different journey than being in employment. And you have to learn a lot about your own character and how you manage people like investors. If you're a giver, as I am, how to make sure that you're not exploited. It was a big journey. And so in 2020, when COVID struck, we got a lot of people talking to us about community and loneliness. And our daughter Hannah said, "You've got to build community again." And I said, I can't possibly do that. It killed me. It killed us. And then I went to bed and I thought, I love community. So why don't we just create it for 100 beautiful business owners that all are defined by their expertise, but they're not smug. They are willing to share that their life is not linear. They know that adversity has made them stronger. They're not scared to share it. And so we created this community we have now, BIP 100, which is called Business is Personal 100. And it's been wonderful for me being back at community. It's been absolutely beautiful to see Thomas back where he belongs in the world, connecting people and contributing. And that's what we do. And I think it's been a real lesson I was not an entrepreneur. I call myself a small business owner. I don't think all of us can take risk and grow. I don't think everybody thinks big is beautiful. Everybody goes onto the internet and thinks there's billions and billions of people here I could sell to. But actually, this whole journey, when I think back to the person I was when I first wanted to start Ecademy and who I was working in a small to medium-sized business, somehow we find ourselves back where we were supposed to be.
That's brilliant. And Penny, you said earlier on, you mentioned significance and relationships. And I know you're writing a new book at the moment about that. So give us a bit of a preview about your new book.
Well, that's very kind of you. Yeah, and I look forward to actually putting pen to paper a bit more than I am, but it will come out. So I'm doing a lot of keynotes about it at the moment, and a couple of gifted from me workshops to places so that I can really test the theories. But I think what we've lost one another a lot over the last 20 years. We've been like boiling frogs in this Silicon Valley project, and we've emotionally disconnected. And to me, deep connection is just the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's also survival. I think it's how we survive as humans, and nothing can take away what was our basic primal needs to have others in our lives. And I think we don't know, and we're not focused on the people that really are significant in our lives enough. And we're putting a lot of attention elsewhere. And devices, have really separated us in many, many ways, the use of technology. But, the greatest joy in business and in life is when you have a good relationship and you help people to feel significant. And I hope that all 100 clients that we have within our community feel very significant to one another as well as to us. And I hope that gives them a sense of significance. And so I think in an age of disconnection, we've almost experienced it to the human level limit that we're willing to go to. And I actually see AI as a massive promise in the world. And I talk a lot in AI companies about the fact that if you can marry emotional intelligence and humans alongside your AI strategies, it's going to be quite a phenomenal future, because AI should actually give us more time for people if it's used properly and implemented properly. And so significance is really ensuring that people that matter to you know they matter. And I don't feel when I call my health insurance company or bank, anybody, whether I'm just a piece of data or even some of the friends that I've got, because everybody is so disconnected, so busy looking at their phones, that we're forgetting that humans need to know they matter. And that's the best way of raising the world, is for people to feel like that.
That's beautiful. So you are optimistic then?
I'm hugely optimistic. Having been in the computer industry since 1983, so that'll be, what's that, 40 years next year. Technology has been something that I've watched every part, and I've always been interested in human behavior sitting alongside that. And social media, I think, has been the biggest crisis. And I think that if 20 years ago we had known the mental dangers and the issues of social media, we would have educated in earlier and been able to prevent some of the pain. And I think if we can educate in earlier now with AI and marry it up with humans, we're going to only see the joy, only see the benefits of it. And so I'm very hopeful. Yeah.
So, Penny, in this new world that we all find ourselves in, if there is somebody out there listening who is facing change in the near future, or wanting to reinvent themselves, start something new, what is the one piece of advice that you would give them?
One would be actually to listen to this podcast, because you're interviewing some amazing people that have managed to do that. But from a personal point of view, and it's why I wrote Business is Personal, I think we need to learn to define our own definition of success. I think we compare ourselves and we get drawn in by so many people that make things look like that's my definition of success when it possibly isn't. My definition of success was never to be a global entrepreneur and to be very wealthy. It wasn't. It was to have a good family, a good marriage, and to be myself and to grow a life around the life that I felt was right for me. And definitely there was lots of aspects of these past years that was reflected within them, but the journey of it was not the journey that I should have gone on. It was not me. So I think, sometimes we have to realize that actually small is beautiful. And Thomas and I have actually got a better standard of living now than we've ever had. And not because we're fleecing people for money. It's just that we're focusing on a few people and making sure that makes a difference to those people, rather than trying to be huge. And to me, I think that's the future. And interestingly, Ecademy was made up of people, about 100 people in each group. And I think that humans want to feel seen and valued, and build a business where you can build that into it.
So perhaps that 100, is kind of the perfect number for being able to contain a feeling of significance between people.
Yeah. I mean, when I do the workshop and I've got this sort of matrix, give and receive as a matrix, the top right where we've got mutual giving and receiving is the bonded one. Oh, I've got to have a door slam in a minute. Sorry. Wind. Yeah. Actually, most people say they've only got the capacity for between 10 and 15 people in there for very strong relationships. You can put your customer in that box, your customers in that box as a group, where you can create a culture for those customers. You can create a strategy for those customers. You can teach your staff that those customers are critical, and your suppliers, and all the people that you would want to celebrate a successful year at the end of. Do they feel significant? And yeah, that's where your attention should go.
Penny, thank you so much for sharing that really extraordinary journey you've had and your reinvention periods with us. It's been really inspiring and enlightening, and very good of you to share that all with us.
Oh, it's been amazing. Your questions are fantastic. So it's such a gift for me to be able to talk through this, and for me to be able to see my journey as well. So thank you so much, Lucy.
Thank you, Penny Power, for sharing your business, life and reinvention journey with all its ups and downs, and your golden thread of relationship, which underpins your wonderful club, Business is Personal, or BIP 100. We didn't have time to talk about all your books, such as the book Business is Personal and Know Me, Like Me, Follow Me. And I can't wait for Penny's next book, Significance, which is due for publication in 2027. For more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on most social media platforms as long as you can spell my name. I am the only Lucy McCarraher on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.